All right, today we're taking a look at putting mid-side processing on stereo effects. Now, there's so many great things you can do with mid-side processing in order to widen out a mix and add some depth, but it's something you always got to be careful with and you don't want to overdo. And it's tempting to overdo mid-side because it sounds so cool and it gives us so much space. And that's why mid-side on our stereo effects is so powerful to do in tandem, because we can get more width and depth out of our mix if we also mid-side process the effects and not just do one or the other. So we're going to go through a few different techniques in this video, get a little bit more complicated as we go. Most of this stuff is things you probably want to do towards the end of a mix. We're going to add a lot of extra width and depth to this mix. So if you're new to this idea, I really think you're going to dig this. Let's hop right in and take a look at some stereo effects buses. So here's our drum bus going, and we have a couple different effect sends on this drum bus. So I have different styles of reverbs and delays going, and they're blending different levels of early and late reflections. And that's all fine and dandy, but they're just kind of static as is in terms of mid-side. Now on the drum bus, I have a mid-side EQ. I'm dropping out sides only in the low end just to make sure that the low end is nice and centered. And right around the fundamental of the snare, we have a little bit of boost in the mids and an equal opposite cut in the sides just to keep the fundamental of the snare nice and centered. Up at the vocal clarity range, we have a side boost right around 2.5K. We're boosting in the sides and dipping out in the mids. So the drums are leaving a little pocket down the center channel there for the vocals, and then we have a little bit of high air only on the sides. This is really common mid-side EQ work to do on a drum bus, but another great thing to do on a drum bus is to add some low-mid expansion on the sides. The low mids are a really powerful part of our mix, but it's really easy to mud up a mix, especially around like 250 hertz is notorious for frequency masking. So if we boost too much to widen out the low mids, it can also compromise your ability to hear high mid frequencies. That's why our first technique, what we're going to do is instead of widening this drum kit in the low mids with mid-side EQ, we're going to widen the drum reverb in that area with mid-side EQ. That way the drums stay the same, but the reverb is fatter and wider in that region. So this is just the drum room reverb. And so what we've done here is a side boost at about 350 hertz, and it's pretty broad. And I'm over accentuating this to make it easier for you to hear. I would dial this back in the final mix, but I have 3.5 dB here boosted at 350 hertz, a big fat 6 dB taken out in the mids. So boost in the sides and a big cut in the mids. At the vocal clarity range up here, we also have at 2.5K, just the reverb being dipped out of the way in the mids. And that's gonna leave more room for the vocal reverb in that region, which we want. And where some of our nice high transient information is up here at 5.8K, we're boosting the reverb only in the sides. So this is very helpful. This is a similar kind of thing we might want to do on the drum bus, but instead we're doing it on the drum bus's reverb. Let's hop back in and take a listen.
Bring it on, bring it on. Yeah, I'm gonna put.
All right, and I'll bypass this back and forth for you. This is just on the drum bus reverb. Yeah, very nice. So it's subtle, but that is expanding the width on the drums without doing it directly on the drum bus. In the mix?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it right between them eyes.
Another thing that we can do, we can add a little bit of an exciter onto it to bring some shimmer in. Of course, we could just put the exciter on the drums. We could also put it before the reverb, but by doing it after the mid-side processing, then we're only encouraging the higher frequencies to carry out on the sides the way that our EQ has already dictated. So this is a nice little trick as well. So I'll start with it bypassed. Yeah, that's a lot of extra shimmer. I'm gonna dial that back a bit. Bypass. And back on.
Game on. Bring it on, bring it on. Yeah, I'm gonna put it right.
All right, and I'll bypass the mid-side EQ and the exciter. Back on. Yeah, so very nice touch. But if you're unaware of that idea, you never tried anything like that before, I highly encourage it because it's a lot better than just doing all of your mid-side processing on your drum bus. You can do a little there and a little on the drum reverb, and you get a really nice effect that way. Now, the toms have their own reverb that's also blended with that drum room reverb. It has a little bit of analog delay, also has some saturation on that reverb. So here's what the toms and their reverb sound like the way we've heard it so far. And if I add this mid-side EQ, which is a similar technique, I am boosting in the sides at 287 and dipping out in the mids. And then up here where the high tom transient is, I'm pushing that out to the sides at just above 4K and dipping that out in the mids. So again, instead of doing this to the toms, we're going to do this to the extra tom reverb. And then another thing that we're going to do is just expand the stereo width a little bit. So let's take a listen to the toms with their original reverb, and then we'll turn on the mid-side EQ, and then we'll turn on the stereo expansion. Very cool. And then we're going to add an exciter to that as well. Awesome. All three of those off. And all three back on. We'll do that tom fill with the full mix again with all three of these off.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it right.
And with all three of them on.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it right.
Yeah. That helps the toms cut through a lot, but in a way that's not crowding the vocal space. It's not adding extra mud to the low mids. Yeah, it's a really nice technique. Next, we have this generic room reverb going on. A lot of different instruments are sharing this reverb. So this reverb effects send has a low shelf, so we don't have the reverb building up down in the low mids and lows, and a little accent up on the top, high frequencies. And this is just kind of a generic medium hall reverb, so we're just adding a lot of extra space here. We can blend different things into it. And after the reverb, we have a little bit of a wide stereo delay set to quarter notes, so this is going to help bounce that reverb around. And then after that delay, we have an instance of TDR Nova set to difference, which is sides. Now, if you want a little bit of a breakdown and explanation on what mid-side is, I will also link to a video I just did. This is called All About Mid-Side Processing, and it explains the difference between left-right stereo and some difference, which is the accurate term for mid-side. But here we have Nova set to difference. So this is taking the sides out of everything on the low end and boosting them a little bit on the high end, just to do a little mid-side shaping to this room reverb. So listen to this reverb without the mid-side EQ on. And then I'll bring it on. Yeah, especially if you're on headphones, you can really hear how that gets a lot clearer in the middle, and a lot of the shimmer goes to the sides, which is really nice. So this keeps this reverb that a lot of different things are sharing from mudding up the mix. Let's hear that in the mix real quick.
Well, I'd rather go blind than see you win. Yes, I'd rather die trying than to let you live. Get your game
Yeah, you can hear when the mid-side EQ is activated on that reverb that the mix just gets a lot clearer. Where the vocal is singing and where the snare is, there's nothing in the center channel there on this reverb. So that's really important. If I didn't have this mid-side EQ on this reverb, I wouldn't be able to turn that fader up so high in this mix. It would just get too muddy. Now let's get a little bit more complicated. Let's go over and take a look at this piano here. Now, this is a free little plugin that you can get off the Voxengo website called MSED. And I talk about this plugin more on that video all about mid-side. We're going to duplicate this piano entirely. And what we're going to do with MSED is on one of the pianos, we're going to mute the mids. And on the other piano, we're going to mute the sides. And we're going to turn both these faders down a little bit. So here's what the piano sides sound like. And this is the piano mids. So having this piano split up between mid and side tracks gives us a lot more control of what we can do with the stereo effects as well. Now we can simply turn up the reverb on the sides, which is very helpful, and turn down the reverb in the center, which is very nice. And simply by turning up the side fader, we can create stereo expansion and push the sides of this piano out. And I'm going to turn down the mids a little bit. So simply by doing that, we've created a lot of extra width here on this piano. And I also showed this plugin in the last video as well, and this is a free sound delay plugin from Voxengo. And I'm going to delay the mid channel of the piano by about 22 milliseconds. And this is going to separate the mids and sides of this piano, which is going to add a lot more depth. And since this piano is not a lead instrument in this song, this is going to be a subtlety in the background where the piano just gets a lot wider because we've changed the stereo expansion, and then it's going to get a lot deeper. And this isn't something the listener's really going to notice, but if they're lost in the song, there's going to be this piano in the background that is way wider than it was before, and it's just going to give kind of a nice 3D texture. So I'll start with this bypassed, and then when I turn it on, you'll hear the separation between the mids and sides of the piano, and listen for the depth open up. Now I'm going to push it a little further. Yeah, very nice. I think you can probably start to see what you could do here. You don't have to do this on a background instrument, but now we have complete independent control of the mids and sides, so we can add stereo effects to one and not the other. We could have entirely different reverbs, saturators, compressors just on the mids, and entirely different settings just for the sides. Hopefully that gets a lot of good ideas going. I think I'll leave this piano alone for now. But let's go back and listen to everything that we just did, turned off the way we originally heard it, and then I'm going to turn it all back on.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it right between their minds. Well, I'd rather go blind than see you win. Yes, I'd rather die trying than to let you live. Get your game on. Bring it on, bring it on.
But there you go. I hope that gave you a lot of great ideas. Processing mid-side is not just for the instruments, it's also really, really useful on the stereo effects. Free little plugins like those ones from Voxengo really open up a whole new world of possibilities. If you want to know more about that, check out the links to the other videos here under the description. And thanks to all my Patreons. If you want to hop over there and check out the free episode and the great Q&A that's going on over there, I would really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else you all want me to tackle, and I catch you all on the next one.